Today on the CEO Barbecue, we're looking for copper and gold and maybe a little bit of silver as well up in the Yukon, together with Yukon Metals. For a bullet point summary of this and all other CEO interviews, please go to resourcetalks.com and subscribe to our free weekly newsletter. The company you're about to hear from has paid us for the production of this interview, but this interview is still intended only for experienced speculators because this is venture capital and mining is a very risky industry where failure is the norm. All conversations are general and impersonal in nature, and they contain forward-looking statements. I'm not a licensed financial advisor, and my business sells content-producing services, which also makes me biased. So before continuing on, please talk to an independent investment advisor with a good long-term track record because your capital is at risk, and also visit setterplus.ca where you'll find the company's official filings. If you're not 100% sure you understand all the biases and the disclaimers that I just showed you, please go to the last section of this video and do not consume this content unless you fully understand and agree with everything said herein. That all said, although technically Yukon Metals has 17 projects that collectively cover approximately 43,000 hectares across the territory, I was going to say province, which is something you shouldn't do. So it's a territory. Fieldwork has only been concentrated on 3 of those projects, which I suppose we can call their flagship projects. The first one is called AZ, which I believe the original prospector gave it its name, and that was Ron Berdahl, by the way, the father of Scott Berdahl, who's of course the CEO of Snowline Gold. But Ron gave the project its name because he thought it might have every metal from A to Z and in it. And I'm kind of stealing Rory's thunder here because I know he likes telling that story as well. But so AZ is an over 13,000 hectare property, and I visited it this year. So cough, cough, wink, wink. Go and watch that video if you haven't. The property is located just about 6 kilometers from the Alaska Highway, so close to the border with the U.S. as well. This is a copper gold target, though, so not really all the metals from A to Z, at least not yet. And there's an over 2,000 meter drill program this year that confirmed a copper bearing system. But whether those grades are good enough is hopefully something we can touch upon later on in the conversation. Birch is the second project, but only second alphabetically, maybe not in terms of importance, although again, I will be asking Rory about that as well later on. Birch is a copper gold skarn with the potential for a porphyry at depth as well. In the initial hole here, encountered stacked skarn horizons with multiple intervals with over 3% copper in them, but doesn't have the size that's needed in that part of the Yukon. Well, again, hopefully I can ask more about that later on. Last but not least, of the projects, of the 3 projects that they're focusing on is Star River. That's also a copper and gold system, although surface samples are showing up quite a lot of silver in it as well. And the initial drilling cut vein swarms with galena, arsenopyrite, and pyrite in it, which can be pathfinders, but they can also maybe be a challenge from a metallurgical perspective. Again, hopefully all things we can touch upon later on in the conversation. Yukon Metals is listed as YMC on the CSE, where the average 3-month volume is about 175,000 shares. The stock's 52-week high is 94 cents, and its 52-week low is 35 cents. With a market cap of just over 66 million Canadian dollars and just under 115 million shares outstanding, today this is a 58-cent stock with a 50 and a 200-day moving average at respectively 68 and 60 cents, which means the stock is now trading below the 2. Moving on to the share structure, again, Yukon Metals' projects were born out of the Berdahl family's work, essentially. So they're still the largest shareholder here, almost a quarter of the shares, so 22% to be specific, are held by them. Insiders are the second largest chunk here at 18%, as well as Keith Neumeyer of First Majestic owns some shares, I believe about 9% of the company. And there's some institutional holding as well, leaving about 43% of the company in the hands of retail. Now, there are close to 20 million warrants outstanding, with the average strike price being 70 cents, as well as just over 9 million options with the average strike of 50 cents. All in all, that means the number of fully diluted shares is just under 143 million. It's just over 143 million, actually, meaning an increase of just over 25% in shares outstanding could happen if all the dilutive securities get exercised, which would then result in about a 20% ownership dilution if, and that's always a big if, of course, but if all the dilutive securities get exercised. And of course, none of this accounts for potential dilution down the road, which is not unlikely. given that this is a pre-revenue company that operates in a capital-intensive industry. Talking about capital, I'll now go through their latest financial statement, which shows me the numbers as of June 30, 2025. So that's almost 4 months ago now. At the time, the company had in total just over 17 million Canadian dollars in current assets, about halfway split between cash and term deposits, as well as some prepaid expenses and account receivables on top of that. In terms of liabilities, there's no long-term debt at the time here, and the current side of the liabilities shows just about $1.5 million worth, most of which are account payables and accrued liabilities, and they're toward related parties. So think management and director fees. Moving on to the P&L for the 6 months that ended on June 30, the total amount recorded as operating expenses for the period shows up as 2.3 million Canadian dollars, although that includes almost $1 million worth of share-based compensation and some depreciation. So the actual out-of-pocket cost was about $1.4 million for the whole period, which means the average monthly expense for the period was about $240,000 a month. Close to 60% of that administrative expense went toward management director professional fees, as well as salaries and wages. Marketing was about $300,000, or just under $300,000 for the whole period. So just under 20% for 20% off the expense was marketing. And then you have office and miscellaneous making up the rest of the administrative expense. This is an exploration company, so naturally they have an exploration and evaluation spend on top of their administrative spend. Those get capitalized, so you can find them under Note 5 in the financial statement, and that's sat at about $2.2 million for the period, which is an average of $355,000 per month. Biggest cost here was just under $1.2 million that was spent on camp, which is just over half of the total expense. Worth pointing out here, though, that the company was not yet drilling during the first half of this year, but as I mentioned earlier, they have been drilling since. So the exploration evaluation costs will have changed both in size and in breakdown. But of course, I'll be asking more about that later on. Normally, I'd also have two ratios here for you, one of them being the exploration to administration ratio and the other one being the drilling to marketing ratio. But again, given that these last 2 quarters were mostly prep work before the big drilling expense, these ratios won't really be representative. And I would also like to remind you that the financial situation for exploration businesses can change quickly. So please visit setterplus.ca and look up the up-to-date numbers yourself. And of course, stick around for the latter part of the conversation where Rory and I will talk money. Now, for this to actually become a conversation, though, I will have to shut up already. And Rory, I'll give you the word here. But first of all, thank you so much for sitting down with me today.
Have me on, Tony.
Pleasure is mine, and I am looking forward to chatting with you. And although I've known you for a while now, and again, I came to site this summer. Thank you for hosting me, by the way, and thank you for the jacket as well. You kind of saved me with the rapidly changing weather up there. But this is still your first time on the CEO barbecue, so we'll have to go through the smell test first, which intends to understand more about what the incentives and the track record of management are really. Starting off with yourself and your track record, who are you, and have you made more money for shareholders before than what you've spent during your career so far?
Well, yeah, I definitely have, thankfully. So you see, I've spent most of the last 20 years in the junior mining space. Save for 7 years, I was with Wheaton Precious Metals. I started out there when it was Silver Wheaton, and we rebranded as we added a lot of gold to the portfolio, and we rebranded as Wheaton Precious Metals, and we did roughly $6 billion worth of transactions. I was there mostly in the copper, gold, silver, lead, zinc, and critical metals space. Prior to that, I was with a company called it was actually a Castle Gold. We had developed a gold mine in Mexico. It was relatively small. It produced about 100,000 ounces per year. And we were acquired by Argonaut Gold. That was the group from Meridian. After their transaction, they started Argonaut Gold, and Castle Gold's El Castillo mine became their flagship. So I was the last person out the door there. I had worked in Toronto at the time, moved back to Vancouver, and started with Wheaton. After Wheaton, I worked with a company called E79 Resources. So I was the founding CEO there. It was during a time where Canadians were investing a lot of money in Australia. It was after the success of Fosterville, and then there's a kind of a bit of a rush there, gold rush with Fosterville South, and we acquired some assets in Australia Australia, and we had a discovery hole that was kind of out of this world. It was 11 meters of 162 grams per ton gold. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that E79 was seeded at 5 cents. We launched at 45 cents, and on high volume, it went to about $1.60. Unfortunately, we weren't able to repeat that success. We weren't able to demonstrate continuity, and it didn't end up being a project. But I think certainly for folks that were in relatively close to the beginning, or even had acquired shares and been following it, there was certainly the opportunity to do quite well there. As I'm sure you appreciate, only a fraction of these companies end up actually developing a mine. We can't all be snow lines, unfortunately. but there's always I mean, it's incumbent upon us as executives to create value for shareholders along the way.
Do you currently have any other executive or board positions or anything else with other companies?
No, it's all Yukon Metals all the time.
With Yukon Metals, what is it that you do really? What's kind of your day to day? I mean, is it as a CEO? Is it marketing and financials? Is it you get involved with Jim and Helena on the rocks, or what does that look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I come to this from the marketing and financial side, but as a CEO, I mean, as I'm sure you appreciate, you end up having responsibility for everything. So, whereas I rely on certainly Helena's expertise as a geologist and someone with 13 years of experience in discovery and taking discoveries to resources in the Yukon. At the end of the day, the buck stops with me, right? So, whether it be hiring Helena and making sure that she has everything she needs to succeed. I mean, I obviously have a lot of faith in Helena, and she's done a great job. So, I mean, ultimately you're responsible, right? Whether it be for finance, for hiring, for making sure everyone's taken care of, certainly the capital raising is obviously a massive part of it. And that's a year-round business. Permitting is huge. That can take a large amount of time, the permitting side of it. And then, of course, there's getting out and doing the outreach and telling the story and working with Kaylee on that side. So, I mean, look, I think we were able to build a good team here, and then working with Jim and the board. I think you end up having to wear many hats, but ultimately you're responsible.
I think I called her Helena, and you're supposed to say Helena, and so she's going to hate me for our next conversation. But I guess I
think it's Helena. Yeah, did
I guess I'll just have to deal with that. And we will have her on, I believe, in our next conversation. Maybe hopefully Great. Jim too. We'll see. How many shares of Yukon Metals do you personally own? Again, as I mentioned, insider ownership in total about 18%. How much of that is you personally, and what's the average cost that you've paid for those shares?
I acquired 650,000 shares, and it was about 20 cents when I acquired them. So it was part of the package when I joined the company. So I think it was seeded at roughly sort of 5 cents, and I was offered shares at 20 cents when I started. And then obviously I'm option incentivized, and those are about, I think, 50-cent average or something like that.
Right. Were there any founder shares, or what's the history behind the vehicle here that essentially took on those 17 projects?
Yeah, so Keith Newmeyer had the vehicle with some other folks. So he, as with Snowline, he kind of worked with structuring it from the financial side. So working with Snowline, it was working with Scott and Ron to structure the company, and on Yukon Metals, it was working with Ron initially, and then I sort of took over to complete the deal. I mean, there was the company was called JKS was the vehicle, and we did an RTO to acquire the properties from Ron and the Berdahl family, right? So that was the trading vehicle, and so some folks on that. So Keith Neumeyer, Pat Burke, who's our chair. He was previous head of capital markets with Canaccord for about a decade. He was part of that shell, and so it really there's quite a few people that brought a lot of expertise on the financial side, and I would say I think the folks that have been involved on that side have supported us in multiple rounds. So kind of what you would expect with folks being in there from the beginning on with that vehicle is then supporting you at 30 cents, 45 cents, 55 cents, and beyond.
Mm-hmm. Really what I'm looking for here, Rory, is are there cheap founded shares and is someone going to blow them out eventually, sort of without prior notice, which I think with your explanation here, you're saying is not going to happen. How do you look at, just to your point of you're incentivized with options, as you said, and as I mentioned in the overview, there are at 50 cents on average. How do you look at open market buying though, as a tool to increase insider exposure to the company? Because although again I do see options and warrants grants in the set, I don't see any open market buying since you RTO'd. So is that something you personally or other insiders would be willing and able to do as the story develops?
Yeah, look, I think certainly willing and able isn't willing and sometimes able. I mean, you're obviously as a CEO and an insider, you're sometimes, although often limited when you can buy and sell. Right. And as a relatively young CEO, if you don't mind, I mean, I don't have unlimited resources. So there's I don't have as many shares as I would like to have, put it that way. As far as having a house and then all of those sorts of things, I don't have unlimited ability to acquire shares out of the market, even if I might like to.
How old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, I'm not that young. I'm 51, but I still living in Vancouver. It's a very expensive city, I mean, I certainly think we, as a management team, are incented to perform. Like no one's going to do extraordinarily well unless they perform for shareholders, and that's how it should be. So I mean, look, I think we've been trading at, I think you mentioned 56, 57 cents. Our options are averaging about 50 cents. I don't think any are below, certainly mine aren't below, I think 45 cents. So no one's going to do very well unless we perform for shareholders. And so I believe our interests are aligned, which is how it should be.
I'm objectively not trying to blow any smoke, but I would not have put you at 51.
I appreciate that.
It is what it is. I think other people would agree as well. But the talking about alignment here, what's the insider compensation profile right now? And I mean, in terms of base salary and bonuses, and how do you determine it? Are there any KPIs or targets that you can tell me about for you and other insiders as well?
Yeah, I mean, when we first started out and bringing Helen in, obviously people have with their hire, they have responsibilities and things they have to live up to. And as we've gone forward, we're working on KPIs for everyone. So whether that be the exploration manager or various project geos, they'll have KPIs going forward. So that's sort of something we initiated really a year into the business. We sort of had our year of prospecting, right when we hired in 2024. We hired Helena, got out in the field, pulled folks in, got out and did some prospecting, and then once we built our team, then worked on sort of systems and how we measure performance, and sort of brought in these sort of KPIs for people across the board, and so that's still something that, I mean, during the season on the ground, it's sort of a difficult time to roll things like that out. And there's other things like we're coming out with new IT things and new systems, and the time to roll those things out is in the middle of the exploration season. But we're working on doing more and more of that now as we go forward.
Is any of that tied, and I guess for you specifically, is any of that tied to share price or market cap in any way?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's based on success. You can certainly have, I think, a much easier time justifying incenting people internally if you've performed, right. So look, I think initially we launched at 38 cents. When I saw you in Beaver Creek in September, we were up to 94 cents. And pre-assay. And I think, look, the market's had a bit of a pullback here, and we've also been waiting on assays for far too long, quite frankly. I think there's been quite a bit of frustration and a bit of a loss of patience there, and so we've seen a pullback. But yeah, look, I think I don't think I would have a hard time justifying bonus for folks or raises that based on if we're not performing in the market. So I completely believe with us being aligned with shareholders' interests. So if there's, I think if we're going from 38 cents to 94 cents in a year or so, I think that's pretty good performance. We've not so far had a market pullback, but yeah, I mean, I think there's work we've done in the field that I think is really important and I think is objectively good. But yeah, I would tend to measure us by our market performance and how well we do for shareholders.
It is tough in the open markets. You're always going to be measured on that, and technical success doesn't always translate to share price
Right.
success. So that's definitely something I want to touch upon later on as well.
Yeah.
But talking about insiders here, do you or anybody else directly involved in the management of the company personally own a royalty on any of the projects you have?
No.
Do you, how involved is the, why I'm asking this really is trying to understand again the kind of the origins of these projects coming to you. How involved is the Berdahl family, either Ron himself or Scott or anybody else? Do they provide like technical and corporate guidance maybe, or yeah, what's their involvement looking like right now?
Well, Scott, no involvement whatsoever. Scott is totally arm's length. I mean, other than having a position, a share ownership in the company through his interest in the Berdahl family portfolio. I mean, Scott's CEO, full-time CEO of Snowline, and so really, look, I think certainly he's been a gentleman, as you and highly professional as you would expect, but really he stays away. Ron, I talk to quite frequently, and certainly that, as you might imagine, that's a call I would always take. So Ron, I mean, Ron's a prospector, so Ron isn't going to. I mean, he won't have a lot to talk about as far as, I mean, obviously it's important that we raise capital and as a huge shareholder. And I mean, he's not only a shareholder, it's reputationally, Yukon Metals is very important for him. It's a lot of his life work. Yeah, we when we have the opportunity to meet with Ron, we do. And if I have the opportunity to talk with him about anything from certainly our priorities and how we're advancing the projects through to permitting, all of those things are things that we talk to Ron about, and he's made himself available to our exploration team, and so no, he's certainly leans forward, and we appreciate him doing that, and wherever we can, we leverage his experience.
So the Berdahl family owns a significant chunk of the company, though, as I mentioned earlier. So not unimportant here for me is to understand what their plans or aspirations for those shares and for Yukon Metals as a whole is. And I imagine again you talk to him about this as well. But do they intend on supporting you in future financings? Are the shares that they have more of an optionality tool for them, or yeah, what are they telling you about their shareholding?
Yeah, I mean, I would expect, I mean, they have remarkably not, from what I gather, you might know better than I do, but as far as I can tell, they haven't sold any Snowline shares as it's gone up to like 11.50 now. And so, yeah, I mean, look, when we paid a cash component for some of these, for these assets, so the 17 assets that we transacted on from the Berdahls. And so there was a $2 million cash component. I mean, Ron it does not live high on the hog. He's pretty right. Like lives. I gather from what I gather relatively simply. And so the fact that they haven't sold any snow line as it's performed as it has, I think shows a huge amount of belief in the company. And they haven't sold a share of ours. I don't expect them to. Look, I think they have a huge amount of position in both companies, and yeah, I'm when I've gone about financing and like I'm looking at new shareholders to create more demand from the stock from other areas, not going to Scott and Ron to increase their ownership already. I mean, they're already insiders, so I expect them to continue to be very patient investors, which we've been blessed to have, is very patient risk capital, which is quite rare in this space for a company of our size and stage of development. So yeah, I expect them to be here until the end. I mean, with Snowline, I think. Look, I wouldn't want to talk for anyone there, but I mean, like it seems logical to me that that's going to be an acquisition target for a major at some point. That they're going to use their multiple to pay for that, and I would expect that they will remain shareholders until then. And perhaps through to with the new co, but and so I would expect nothing less with Yukon Metals. I think with the type of, and I know you're going to get into this, but the type of model that we have and the stage of development is that's the most logical way that these the exit strategy, right, is acquisition, whether it be by asset or become as the company as a whole.
Mm-hmm. I don't know where you find patient risk capital, but once you find it, hold on to it. I mean, that is absolutely rare. So that's an important point that you made there. How important you said? I mean, it is important to the Berdahls. How important is this investment to you personally? I mean, just the financial commitment. Is it a large part of your investments that you've made so far, or how important is this in your portfolio?
Well, as far as I mentioned, this is all I work on, right? So I don't have any other interest in the space. I think we're having one of the most interesting bull markets in my experience over the last 20 years or so. And this is where I and folks on this management team are choosing to spend their time. And so I'm incredibly invested personally. I'm sure financially I'm incented only, like, again, through options and through the shares I was provided when I took the position. Other than this, I mean, again, I don't know how personal you want to get, but other than this, it's my, like, I mean, I own my house and a car, and I mean, I'm not rich by any means. So, right. But yeah, I mean, putting the amount of time and effort that you put into that is required of this job. And I couldn't imagine really having anything else to do or having any of my attention diverted to anywhere else. That is a huge, I think, amount of commitment and to this role in this company. Right. That, I mean, there's yeah, I mean, I guess earning potential and my career is 100% based on the success of this company. So I don't think I could be any more committed. I guess if I had more money, I could buy more shares. That's about it. But I'm sadly not going to get a second mortgage on my home to buy more shares, unfortunately.
That's actually an audience favorite question that I do ask. And just for the record, I didn't send any questions up front, and I don't do it for these interviews. But it is something that I do ask. Would you mortgage your house if the company had no money to finance it and push it forward? So it's funny that you're mentioning that there. Let me tell you how personal I want to get, though. What color is your car?
It is gray.
I was hoping you're going to say like lime green or like
no, it's not. Nothing. I'm boring.
You see those in Vancouver though a lot. Apparently, Vancouver is somewhat of a supercar city. You see that a lot around Vancouver. I thought maybe
There's a lot of
maybe
wealthy
you're one of
people
those.
here for sure.
Rory, that about does it for the smell test. I want to move on and talk
Okay.
business strategy here, as you just mentioned, and
Okay.
essentially ask you about how you plan on making shareholders and then yourself some money from here on out, specifically because you have 17 projects, which is quite a
Mm.
lot for a junior. And I know you're only focusing on three of them, but that's still division in your focus. You got to pick and choose. How do you balance that? How do you balance the risk reward here and make sure you're giving the right amounts of attention to the right projects?
Yeah, I mean, look, we went through a process once we hired Helena and we brought our team together. We went through a process of prioritizing, and it was important with 17 assets. And you can, even with our relatively good access to capital, you can blow that money out pretty quickly if you don't focus. And so, but we looked at certainly at Birch and AZ, we looked at the scale there, right? So that was important, something that is really had the potential to be large and meaningful, and then. So AZ is a 13,000 hectare property. We believe has porphyry, the porphyry potential there. Birch is 7,000 hectares. We believe we have an intact copper porphyry, and yeah, AZ. The other element was proximity to road and power. AZ is 6 kilometers away from the Alaska Highway, as you referenced earlier. The Alaska Highway goes down to Skagway, Deepwater Port. Those were some of the reasons that we focused on those two assets, and then also grade. Grade obviously being terribly important. So at AZ, we were seeing nice high grade at surface, 3.5% copper, where you were taking a pickaxe to the side of the hill there, 3.5% copper right at Chair Mountain there, and then at Birch, yeah, I mean like a 1,400 meter long gold in soil anomaly, up to a gram per ton gold in soil, seeing high grade molybdenum there, real high, like nice copper, high grade gold and copper and silver at surface. So really all of the indications of a porphyry there at Birch. And then at Star River, we just had outrageous bonanza grade silver and gold at surface. So 11,000 gram per ton silver and 101 gram per ton gold at surface. Yeah, so that, I mean, that, and it's right on a road. That was an hour away from Ross River, 5 hours drive from Whitehorse, able to drive right onto the property. So those are the things that we looked at. Yeah, I mean, and looking at like strong jurisdictions, AZ and Birch, for instance, we have a very good, strong relationship with the First Nation, the communities there. We actually work with Vision Quest. They've been really integral to our efforts there. That's a First Nation owned and operated exploration and outfitting company, and they have strong leadership there within the Kluane First Nation, and so they've done our line cutting. They've done a substantial amount of staking for us. I think almost all of the staking what Vision Quest did. Camp management, building our camps, everything from camp cooks to actually building out all of the pads and the surfaces to put tents on and managing all of that. So yeah, no, they've and actually working with us on drilling as well. So Vision Quest have been incredibly important for us. Our relationship with the Kluane First Nation has been very important to us, and so Birch and AZ both fall in Kluane's traditional territories, and then with Star River is with the Ross River Dene Council, and we were able to come to an exploration agreement with them earlier this year. So it's all been very positive from that standpoint, and those are some of the these are some of the ways that we judge how to prioritize assets. Right? And in the Yukon, it's tremendously important to have that support. Right? It's binary. You either have it or you don't, and you can't do anything without it.
I definitely want to ask and understand more about the First Nations across the different projects that you have here. Do you see yourself becoming more of a prospect generator from here on out, though, or do you want to employ that classic, drill, discover, sell strategy? Because just simply because of the number of projects, that's why I'm asking this.
Drill, discover, sell. So I mean the Berdahl, their family portfolio, they were prospect generators, right? And so that's prolifically so, right? And so we acquired that group of assets. It's important for us to, so we're prioritizing our work. I think behind the three assets that we drilled this summer, there's at least another three that we would want to advance to drilling next season on top of the three that we're currently drilling. We could look at portfolio optimization strategies in the future of divesting some, but it's important to understand what you have before you consider and understand the value of it before you consider divesting. What I would also say is we've had substantial interest from major mining companies for certainly AZ and Birch, large copper gold assets, have attracted significant corp dev interest. And those are our core assets. So not something that we would ever consider divesting of fully, but certainly intriguing that the AZ and Birch copper gold porphyry targets with potential for massive scale have attracted substantial interest. And yeah, elsewhere, I think, look, if there's an opportunity for us to, if we decide that there's some assets there that are non-core to our interests, and there's an opportunity either to spin them out into a new co, we could consider that. It's really our job is to create value for shareholders. So there's a few different ways to do that, but we'll look at all of them as a management team and as a board.
I wonder what the thresholds are for you deciding whether to keep them or not to keep them. So that is something that I will ask you later on here, Rory. Mm-hmm. But what do you think is overall, just still talking strategy here? What's the biggest challenge in that strategy? What do you think might be the biggest risk you'll encounter in that process, and how are you going to manage that?
Well, as far as risk is concerned, I mean, look, I think the priority is not spreading yourself too thin, right? I mean, I think, look, we've had good access to capital, and as I mentioned, you want to be able to focus that as much as possible, which is why we focused in on the three we did. Yeah, look, I think there's another asset on top of the three that I mentioned, Risby, that we're very keen on and want to advance work there next year. It's just there was only so many assets that we can focus on this year. Look, I think the substantial risk would be considering divesting too early, right? And before you know what you have, that would be risky. And I think in the Yukon, you're also it's a place where you don't have to divest quickly there. It's relatively cheap to hold on. The holding costs are quite cheap. Point in fact that I mean the Berdahls were able to acquire and hold on to 17 assets for a long period of time. So it's not we're not in any pressure monetarily to move on from assets, right? I don't think there's only so much land and prospective land out there, and we have 17 very highly prospective properties handpicked by the Berdahl's. So we're certainly in no rush to divest of anything. It's really just about creating shareholder value and how we best do that. So part of that is us getting on the ground and doing analysis, and we do some of that over the winter, right? There's a lot of desk analysis that takes place in addition to the field work that we do.
I do often wonder, what do you guys do during the winter? So I do have it here on my list. So we'll talk about that desk analysis and what else you do here. I do want to talk about the projects from a higher level here as well. And again, we'll have Jim and Helen on maybe for a separate interview to do a deep dive on the rocks. But these 17 projects, why do you have them? How are you able to get them in the first place? I mean, if they're great, why wouldn't Ron, keep them? And you mentioned he's a prospect generator, but they are keeping Snowline and Valley. So yeah, what was the story behind that? And talk to me about that.
Well, no, Ron didn't keep Snowline and Valley, right? That they transacted with a company to acquire
Right.
those primary gold assets. So Snowline was created with a shell as a vehicle, just like Yukon Metals with, and Keith Neumeyer was involved on that one. Did an RTO to float the primary gold assets in the Berdahl family portfolio. So, I mean, and that's quite tidy, right? Just bringing all of the gold assets into one company. And really there's only one asset called Nut, which kind of fell to us. That was a gold asset. It's kind of in their area. I think it was perhaps even a bit controversial that it didn't go to them. But essentially, the balance of the portfolio is, AZ and Birch, copper gold, which might not have fit in with a primary gold story. And then there's some silver, lead, zinc, some critical metals. So no, I mean, it's very similar genesis. They completely divested of the portfolio that they had, starting with the Snowline assets and then the Yukon Metals assets. So, I think, as far as they're concerned, I mean, Ron is now in his 70s. I mean, he spent a long time, and I mean, like, he's still fighting fit. I should say. I mean, he still can. They go major hikes up mountains and
I didn't know Ron was in his 70s. My mind's being blown in terms of age throughout this podcast. So I feel like I should say I didn't know he was in his 70s. Like he seems fit, and I guess a lifetime in the bush and sun exposure will do that to you.
Well, look, he is incredibly fit, and so, like, he puts, like, people are still wowed that he just start walking up mountains and beat people up the mountain and stuff. So, but I mean, there is a time. Look, I think now is a good time to see his and his family's life work come to fruition. And the reason you float these things isn't because, I mean, look, I think he is in his 70s, and so he's done a lot of prospecting. I'm sure he's still going to do some more, but the reason you actually put these things on exchange and raise money for them is so that you can go out to the market, raise a bunch of capital to do the work on them. Like, Ron and family were able to raise small amounts of money to do limited amount of work on these assets, but you're never going to be able to raise as a family the type of capital that you can raise, that Snowline can raise, and that we can raise, right? I mean, we've already raised $26 million to advance these assets, and so I mean, that's exactly why you do these things. So I think I think Ron is very keen, just like he was with Snowline and Valley Project and other assets that they have. He's very keen to see these move forward and to see his life work come to fruition in the form of discoveries and develop and assets being developed. Right. So, like, I think that's why you do this. Yeah.
That's no, that is a good overview, and it does give you a perspective of how you ended up holding those assets or keeping them. Talking about going back to the First Nations issue thing here, because I'm thinking about it, or the First Nations thing really, and how many you're dealing with across the 17 projects. How many nations do you deal with?
Well, the focus as of now has been so Kluane First Nation, White River First Nation, with certainly with Birch and AZ. And then with Star River, that's a Ross River Denny Council, and so that they're important. And then the NND, which is the Snowline, work with quite a bit. We've had communication with them relative to the Knot asset specifically. That's a gold asset that's relatively close to Snowline's portfolio. So those are the three, three or four key First Nations, but I would say that the one we've dealt with the most on our two of our three core assets so far has been the Kluane First Nation, and then with White River as well, and then Ross River Denny Council for Star River.
How many of the projects you have right now are signed or from perspective of First Nation agreements?
So just now, as of now, just Star River relative to the Ross River Denny Council. So we have an exploration agreement there with the Kluane First Nation. Look, I think we've had a very good relationship. They've been very open to meeting with us and very cordial there as far as having getting together for a meal when we're in the same places. And look, I think as we go forward here, and certainly as I mean, I'm sure we'll get into this when we get into some of the assets. We'll be moving from a class 1 permit, which is really pretty early stage and gives you a maximum of 10 people at camp, 250 person days. So it's essentially when you're doing your discovery drilling, you're looking for discoveries and prospecting. When you go to a class 3, you then can go to a much more major camp, so up to 50 people camp, instead of doing just as Snowline did with Valley and their other assets in 2021 into 2022. I mean, I don't think they drilled more than sort of 1,600 meters at Valley their first year, and then but going into a class 3 permit, you can do 20,000 meters of drilling, given the size of camp. So I think that will be the time when, to answer your question, we'll more engage more with the Kluane First Nation as we now that we believe certainly Birch and AZ we're really into something there, that it will be time to sort of formalize an agreement with them as we go forward, and we're already working on this class 3 permit now.
What is it that you have to complete for that class 3 permit? What is it? Is it like mostly paperwork? Are there specific studies? What do you have to do?
Yeah, so it's. I mean, with this one, it's so we'll put in the paperwork by the end of this month, and then it's generally about a 6-month process. And so then we're already working on wildlife studies. So it's important for us to understand what wildlife is in the area, how we can go about mitigating any disturbance whatsoever there, listening to First Nations, listening to other stakeholders in the community about any and all concerns they might have, and so that we can mitigate those and make sure that we bring everyone along as we seek to advance these projects, that we have support from the Kluane First Nation, White River, certainly between AZ and Birch, and then all the other communities, whether they be hunters, outfitters, that we listen to any and all concerns they have, and make sure that we can be good partners with them. That's the focus.
Mm-hmm. What are you looking for here in the portfolio, though? What are the internal hurdles or kill criteria, if you will, that you're looking for before you actually start engaging in that process? Because engaging in the process of permitting is not something you can afford to do at random. Like, you got to have a plan. You got to know what you're looking for, where you're looking for it. What is it that you're really looking for? What's the size and grade profile of something that you're looking for?
Well, with Birch, certainly. I mean, I think Birch is. We feel like we're really into something there, and our model has been successful in demonstrating skarn and across 750 meters. So for there in particular, I mean, we want to be able to drill this skarn off at the very least, so demonstrating skarn across. I think the anomaly is at 1,400 meters, so we want to be able to demonstrate that. We see the potential for multiple skarn. So there we see, and then multiple skarns, and then we believe the source of the heat source, porphyry, is 2 kilometers to the south. We'll be working to demonstrate continuity there. So at Birch, we have the grade, size. It really ticks all of the boxes. So that I would say is the biggest priority as far as advancing that and advancing that towards a class 3 permit, so that we can drill off that skarn that we believe we're into and we've identified. So we want to be able to do do a substantial amount of work. AZ, we weren't able to, on our first pass, orient ourselves as well as we have at Birch. But there's just so much copper in place there across 13,000 hectares, which is just a huge property. And it's just, it's the struggle there has been, it's just so vast. There's copper everywhere. I mentioned a 3.5% copper. Ron found 26% copper in another skarn area. There's another area with 11%. It's vectoring in to find the source of all of that copper. And so we're going to need to spend a bit more time there. The model we have at Birch was really solid based on a lot of soil work, a lot of geophysics went into that. And at AZ, we're going to need to refine that model so we can orient ourselves like we have at Birch. So I would say both of those, certainly the opportunity, the scale of two of these what we think are two big porphyry assets. I think that warrants follow up. It warrants doing the class 3 permitting and being able to build a major camp where we can do a full season of work, not just a month.
What would that look like more specifically for AZ? Again, it grades weren't as good as you might have hoped for in the first pass. What's the future for AZ more specifically?
Yeah, so we finished the season there doing a substantial soil program. So that will be the focus of a future news release. And so what needs to be done there in order to kind of get the kind of model that is served us so well at Birch is more soil work, more sort of flying the property, more induced polarization work. So that's what that looks like. First up, and you can do some of that with a class 1 permit, but it needs more work. But certainly what we have, our first hole, we were still into 24 meters of oxide copper right out of the gate, and we feel we're into the right rocks to the south in the new target area. Some really nice chalcopyrite at depth, and just a lot of smoke. A ton of smoke there, and so there is the importance is vectoring in, doing that on a cost efficient basis, right? So doing your geophysics, it's a lot cheaper than drilling, but yeah, we feel really strongly about AZ. Obviously where it's situated, but that's I think one of the jewels in the crown there, and it was always one of Ron's favorite assets.
You don't have the specifics, and I imagine, on what next year's drill program is going to look like. That's probably going to take some more data. When do you think you're going to have that plan out to market?
Yeah, we'll start in November. So next month, we have our board meeting towards the end of the month there. So that's our Q3 board meeting, and generally in that meeting, we'll start to talk about how we are going to prioritize the next season and sort of do preliminary budgets. You don't end up finishing those budgets until the next year, but we'll start having the start of a plan of how we're going to go about how we're going to prioritize next year. What is that going to look like from a camp perspective, geophysics, drilling, and the most obvious priority now, even pre-assay at Birch, is to drill off the skarn that we've identified at Birch. So that one's pretty obvious, and so that will take a lot of drilling. Right, relatively, it won't be. It might take a couple of seasons there before when you're drilling off the skarn, and then you'd come back and maybe do some infill drilling the season afterwards. But I think we feel like we can identify at least a couple of skarns there next year at Birch.
Do you think you might be drilling some of the other targets as well outside of AZ, Birch, and Star River, or is it too early for that?
No, we would like to drill next year. We'd like to drill Risby, which is really interesting. So that one's tungsten, but and it looks like an intrusion-related gold system there. When they were doing drilling there, they didn't test the core at depth, and as far as we can tell, it ended in gold. So more to come from Risby. That one has been really interesting for us. At Birch, there's another asset there called Talbot, just to the south. We've seen some really interesting prospecting work there. And then at AZ, there's another asset called Fairway. And so those are three of the assets that we really like. There's Nut as well, which is in NND territory. So there's 3 or 4 other assets that we would be interested in advancing. But I would say, yeah, Risby, Fairway, and Talbot would be 3 that we'd like to drill next season. So those would be advancing Class 1 permits on, and Class 3 on Birch, AZ, and Star.
If you run out of names for targets and projects, I want to offer myself up for that job. I'll take it. I think that's right within my skill set. That's about as much as I can. What the NND, by the way, how open are they to conversations now? I mean, given that the Victoria thing is still to be solved and sold potentially soon, how open are they to conversations about new Explorcos coming into their region?
Yeah, I mean, they seemed quite open, right? I mean, at the time when we were looking at doing our sort of first pass work, they did ask us to hold off on work there, which is understandable. And so, yeah, I mean, look, I think we will be engaging with them on what can be accomplished with Nut next season. I see we've never had a permit refused, and like I said, it was perfectly reasonable of them to ask us, right, given everything they were working on and going through to prioritize elsewhere during that time. And so I see no reason why we wouldn't be able to advance work on Nut next year. And I think, as far as I mean, you might have thoughts of your own, but as far as I can see, the climate, it just looks so much different than it did in summer of last year, right? I mean, I think there's been so much good news coming out of the territory. Obviously, Snowline provided a substantial halo effect and the success they've had there, but success in the ground and technically, but also with the relationships and the support they've built, right? And so I think that's being a positive. So look, I think we'll be interesting to see what happens with Victoria, and I think someone coming in that has a good relationship with the NND and can backstop development there will be important. Important to be a good partner to them. But yeah, as far as I can tell, there's no reason to think that we won't be able to work productively with them.
It's very kind of you, Rory, to assume that I have thoughts of my own, but I rarely have thoughts, let alone of my own. So I do appreciate the optimism, though. Do you still have some assays coming out, though? I think Star River is not being announced yet. I mean, you started drilling late August there. When are we going to see some information from that?
It's been frustrating. I mean, look, it's kind of the double-edged sword from the Yukon. I mean, I was just talking about things going very well in the Yukon, and it's been I think people have recognized in a good market that we have that there's just so much potential there, so much prospectivity. But so what we've seen is more companies raise more money and do more drilling and create more core than in previous years, and it was already relatively tight assaying capacity. There's been no more assaying capacity built. And so the hole that we just put out on Birch in sort of early mid October, we put into the assay lab the first week of August. So it's taking over 2 months. And so, and it's frustrating. I mean, I talk to investors; they're frustrated, and I'm frustrated. We're frustrated. I mean, I talked to the assay lab. I mean, they're all well-meaning people and trying to do good work. But I mean, the stuff there was just too much capacity. Even in Whitehorse, so the core is going down to Vancouver, not even getting processed in Whitehorse, and then in Vancouver, they're getting material from around the world. So they're getting stuff from not only this jurisdiction, they're getting stuff from other areas in the Americas. So it's just the backlog has been frustrating, and I think I mentioned that we have patient risk capital, but not everyone is able to have that sort of pristine amount of patience. So we've put one hole out on Birch, right? So one hole into that hole 7,000 hectare property into 26 meters of continuous mineralization, some nice high grade hits of copper, 2.5, 2.7%, I believe, 3.2, 3.5% copper equivalent in the first hole. So yeah, I mean, pretty a good start there.
So what does that come down to for you, I mean, in terms of news flow here over the next couple of weeks into the end of the year? What's kind of the cadence, and how many news releases do you think you're going to have?
So we'll have 4 out of 5 holes there. We listed 6 holes at Birch. One of them we had to pull up, so it was only like 30 meters deep, and we pulled it up and drilled at a slightly steeper angle. So there's really 5 holes at Birch. So we just put out 1, and which we're quite excited about, as I just referenced. And so 4 or 5 holes left at Birch, and then all 8 holes to come at Star River. So really, like 2 of our key assets, really the majority of the work that we did this summer, the assays are still to come. Obviously, I think Birch has attracted the interest of the market because of the potential and the size there. I think when we announced the work we were doing at Birch in September 3rd, we were trading at roughly 60 cents, and just on visuals of the core and sort of an explanation of what we were seeing in core, we went from 60 to 94 cents based on that. So I think it's fair to say that the market is attributing quite a bit of our value towards Birch.
Mm-hmm. What do you think is because you mentioned how big the property is and just how many meters you've put into it? What do you think is the bare minimum you'll need for a decently sized program next year? Like what's kind of the what's the minimum meterage that you want to put into the different properties altogether?
Well, I mean, Birch is the one we understand the most at this point, right? Even though we just have 1 hole back from it, we did have the 4 first holes each going into scar mineralization. So that one, I mean, I would say 10,000 meters at a minimum next year. Right, really just having a couple of rigs working on that scarn and drilling that off, and then we'll have other to the south. We have some really interesting stuff that we'd like to drill there too. So that one's the most obvious. At Star, we haven't got our assays back yet, so we wouldn't know how we'd go about following up on that yet. And AZ, look, I think at AZ you still want to. I think, yeah, discretion is the better part of valor there. Initially, I think it's more we need to tighten and sort of work on the model that we have at AZ to get it where it is at Birch, where we're drilling and we're into what we're looking for right away every time, and that's what we need to do at AZ. So look, TBD as far as total amount of meterage there, but certainly I would like to see like 3,000-4,000 meters done at AZ as well.
What are your drilling costs, or what were they this year per meter?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't totally reconciled that yet. Like all of that billing. I mean, we basically just demobed in the field now, but roughly it's somewhere like Birch, which is helicopter supported. You're looking at roughly $800 a meter. So it's important that the drilling be productive and give you a return on investment.
So 10,000 meters at $8 million for that program.
Yeah, roughly 7.5. Yeah, for all of the work we did this summer.
Okay, and then no, I'm just thinking about so how much money are you going to have left at the end of this when everything is announced?
We had $9 million at the beginning of this month.
Okay, so
that's in the treasury, and that's all hard dollars.
Right.
Yeah.
But that it doesn't sound like it's going to be enough to do all the drilling that you want to do next year, as well as cover G&A. Because if you're thinking, because I think your season starts June, July.
Yeah, look, I think we can do some things in May, right? We can do some flying work and perhaps doing some geophysics, but generally, yeah, you're going to be drilling starting in June.
Yeah, because you're. No, I was just trying to figure out. Essentially, G&A was about $300,000 a month over the first 2 quarters of this year.
Yep.
So call it $2.5 to $3 million on G&A between now and then you want to do if that program costs you the same, so 7.5, 8, so you're going to have to raise money essentially before you complete next year's drill program, but you probably can kick off something.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way we've approached that so far is to be able to raise capital at a time that makes sense for us, right? So, look, obviously it's a capital intensive space. So when we came out of the gate last, so April 2024, we raised 15 million. 2 million of that went to the Berdahls. We essentially started with 12 million. Did our prospecting season last year, and then at the end of 2024, I was offered financing. I passed on it because I knew that we had bullets out there that we could still get out on AZ and Birch, and so I think we were able to then in April top up at 55 cents. So we came out of the gate at 38 cents, did some prospecting work. I think we were able to create some value, topped up with $11 million at 55 cents. So I think the key is never not having to be price takers and not having to take money, take what's on offer. And so I think that's where we'll be again, right? So we have, with that 9 million, we're in no pressure and you mentioned, about 300,000 a quarter in G&A. And so, we're in no pressure to access the capital markets anytime soon. We can afford to be patient, make sure that we get out all of the compelling news that we expect to have, get out there and promote that effectively before we even consider a raise. And I mean, really, the way I like to go about it too, as I mentioned in November, we'll start having those initial budget discussions and priorities for next year, and we'll refine those and sharpen our pencils heading into the new year, getting down to a closer margins there as far as what the cost is actually going to be, talking to contractors and providers, and then we'll have a use of proceeds, and we'll know exactly how much we want to raise. But look, I think Birch, is going to warrant a substantial drilling program. As I mentioned, I'd like to do 10,000 meters there at a minimum. So I mean, we're going to need capital to do that. That we've been able to attract capital here, and I'm offered capital almost all of the time.
You mentioned G&A 300, that's what it was over the first 2 quarters of the year. Do you imagine it's going to stay there, or do you want to ramp up like marketing? Do you need to take on anybody new, like new staff members or something like that?
Yeah, no, I would outside of the drilling season, I would suggest that's a realistic number. I mean, that's a good average is about 300,000 a quarter. I don't see we have a core personnel there. We've of project geos and basically an exploration manager that work for Helena, and so I think we've got a team there that can manage 2 to 3 drilling programs at the same time. And then obviously you scale up during the season with contract folks and people you can bring on just during the season. So no, I think we're right size for what we have here. And I mean, promotion is key, and I think you'll see an effort here, a substantial effort from us as we put out the balance of these drill holes now in November. I think you'll see a substantial promotional effort, so that would probably be the only difference there that as compared to the regular G&A cost. So is just making sure that when we do put out these drill holes from Birch and Star, that we've got eyes on them.
How do you plan on getting those eyes? How much money do you want to spend on it? And what are you going to be buying?
Look, I think steady state, we make sure that we do as much as possible to ensure that we're obviously out doing conferences and such. I think what we can do going forward is to make sure that we're doing more in the way of banner ads and finding new ways to get out and tell our story and put it in front of people. Right. So we'll obviously be transparent with the market with any and all of our efforts. So you'll see what we're up to.
Mm-hmm. in terms of budget, again, it was about 300 grand for the first half of this year, just under, so 280, call it, for marketing.
Yeah.
How much would you want to increase that by?
Look, I think, yeah, I mean, I think with a company of our size and I think it's key. The key elements for shareholders are what do you put in the ground? How much of your focus is based on that? And then promotional dollars, I think, are a big component as well. So, look, I think on top of the regular amount that we spend, I think spending a reasonable amount, whether it be $150,000 on a substantial promotional program over 3 to 6 months, I think is warranted as well. Yeah, I mean, I think we spent about $7.5 million in the field, and so I think I think it's important to spending all of that money. And there's lots of competition out there for capital and for investors, and so it's important to get out there and tell the story and make sure that you bring new eyes and create demand for the stock, right? So yeah, I mean, like I think any and all initiatives that we take will certainly anything major will communicate to the market, but yeah, I think it's important to, when you believe in what you're doing, I think it's important to show support for your programs, for your investors, and for the drilling programs you're doing by making sure that people can see them and understand what you're doing.
You were pretty clear when I asked you earlier on about whether you want to be a project generator or not. Again, given the fact that you have 17 projects in the portfolio, you said, no, I want to explore, discover, sell. Would you consider selling or optioning out some of the projects that you have right now in order to finance AZ or Birch or Star or any of the other targets that you have?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly an option, right? I mean, there's plenty of levers that you can pull, and look, you look at these things, you look at potential cost of capital, but then also the potential cost of divesting of something that you don't fully understand yet, right? That you haven't had the opportunity to get out into the field. So, look, I think there is certainly potential there. Other potential, as mentioned, and there's look, I wouldn't do anything without a thorough process of fully understanding the value and creating as much value of that as possible ourselves, and de-risking as much as possible ourselves. But if you bring in, for instance, a major to help you drill off porphyries porphyry at Birch or AZ, that is then money that you don't need to raise anymore, right? If you and a major, you can, instead of doing 5 or 10,000, right? If you've identified a mineralized body, I mean, a major can help you drill hundreds of thousands of meters, and then that's money that you don't then have to raise yourself, and shareholders don't have to provide. So, look, I think there's plenty of ways to raise capital. I tend to favor equity, right? I think as long as we've had a good time of attracting equity, and our cost of capital has been quite low. I think when we raised $11 million, $5 million of that came from Cormark and Canaccord, and even a decent portion of that was folks that we already knew. And then we raised $6 million ourselves, well, on a non-brokered basis. So I think we've been able to raise capital at a pretty reasonable rates, and so I think that would be preferable rather than certainly using the assets that we have to generate capital. I think I would favor more just doing equity and considering the value of properties and the value of potentially whether it be creating a new co and spinning those assets out in its own right, not because we need the money.
You said other stuff are going to be happening in the meantime as well as the winter kind of rolls in. It actually already has, because we've gone back an hour on the clock here, and it was dark at like 5 o'clock, I think. So what are you going to be doing in the dark months? Any field work or anything else happening, or is it mostly desktop work?
Well, I mean, like I said, so it's desktop work. I mean, we've finished off our soil sampling at AZ. We will be kind of getting into the field. I mean, probably you're talking about May, really doing work again. But now you're thinking about major camps now at Star, Birch, and AZ. So it's considered like it's bringing in contractors there, planning all of that. It's obviously planning all of the work for next year. Permitting is a huge that is a year-round effort. So you're not in the field over the winter, but there's still a massive amount of work to do as far as to planning in the field, and then seeing that plan, budgeting and planning the capital that you're going to need. That all takes time. So, and then obviously I mean, from the finance perspective and this side, I mean, you're out telling the story year round, right? So, I mean, before the end of this year, we'll have all of our permitting stuff in, and then we'll have the comments and working on the plan with relative to wildlife and such. Then you're into in the new year, into Roundup. You're into the VRIC and then PDAC and Korshaks and all of that. So it really never stops. The folks when they're out of the field for a little bit, but I know Helena has them all working hard on. First of all, we still have the majority of our assays to come out, right? So it's still interpreting all of that before we put out our news, right? Making sure that we're able to talk to investors and have them understand the potential and have them understand what we're doing and what we're planning next. That all takes time. So,
yeah. And I'm sure we're going to be having conversations in the meantime as well, talking about these developments as they happen. When do you think the next time is going to be that you and I are going to be talking?
Well, I think November is going to be a really big month for us, right? So for drilling, I expect to have all of our drill results out by the holidays. And so I think it'd be great to have a follow up there with Helena and be able to interpret those results for you. And I would imagine hopefully not too long into the new year.
Well, I'm sure you're going to need at least some time to recover from having looked at my face for at least an hour here. What's the most fair criticism that you've had of Yukon Metals, Rory, since you started running it now? Almost 2 years now, I guess.
Yeah. No, we started putting it together last April, right? 2024 in April. So, it's been, I mean, I think whether it's fair criticism of us or not is, but look, I think I talked to investors that have been very patient with us and very supportive of us, and we've spent like a lot of time and energy and money in the field this summer, and we're waiting on 80% of our holes from Birch, which has become it's looking like the flagship here, and that's frustrating, right? And so, I think whether it's I'm quite comfortable that it's not something that our team. I'm quite comfortable that they were efficient and getting core in, and our systems were good there and getting everything in on time. But it's certainly a fair frustration, whether or not it's a criticism of us but the system or the right. I mean, I think that I feel empathy and obviously our own frustration here, waiting for assays well into fall that we were doing early August. But yeah, I think that's the one really is the one that I deal with all the time from shareholders. It's just frustration over timing. I mean, it's not usually what I want to do is put one hole out from a drill program. You want to be able to put a few out or even a handful to provide context. But we put out one hole for Birch because that's what we had. And so I wanted people to know, we're not holding on the news here. We're putting it out and wanted to provide people with an idea that we told you that we were into scar and mineralization, and we thought 20 meters of continuous scar mineralization in our first hole, and we were.
Again, I appreciate this overview, and I think it's been a good in-depth introduction. Not everything, though. There's definitely stuff that I'm forgetting to ask. For people listening, whatever I'm forgetting to ask, please let me know. I'm going to ask it during the next interview. And Rory, what's your most fair criticism of me? What do you wish I would have asked? What do you think I'm forgetting? Or yeah, what else did you imagine going differently here today?
No, nothing, Antonio. I think it would be good to dive into the projects a little bit more in future. And look, but like I said, you've obviously built this kind of the work that you do in this kind of staged way that you can introduce the company to investors. And I think this is a good first pass overview of it. And look, I think what is key to understand for investors here is the opportunity is that you have 17 assets handpicked by the Berdahls, and none of these assets are duds. I mean, each one that we've done work on has been incredibly interesting in its own right. And we're just, as a junior, there's just only so many you can wrap your arms around at the same time. We have one property at Birch that looks like it could be a monster, an intact, totally preserved copper porphyry. There's one about an hour away owned by Western Copper and Gold, a casino. That's a roughly $600 million market cap company on a single asset, essentially their flagship being casino. Obviously, they've got billions of tons there of copper gold mineralization, but I think you start to see the kind of opportunity set. So Birch looking incredibly interesting. Lots more to come from there. Still 4 out of 5 key drill holes. AZ looks incredibly interesting too. Huge opportunity there with copper, gold, only 6 kilometers away from the Alaska Highway. And we still have all of our assays remaining from Star River. And those are just 3 of the 17 projects that we have on the assets. So but I think the opportunity is huge. We're still very early in the process. As of course you'll know, Snowline they didn't put out the discovery news release on Valley until January 2022, right? So that was a world-class, and it's fair to say those words get overused, world-class discovery in mineralized body, only discovered like basically a year into the program. They started in 2021. It was discovered. Discovery hole was news released in 2022. So these things take a little bit of patience, right? And then obviously they got their discovery hole, and then they were able to demonstrate this wonderful deposit. So really, one hole can make all the difference, right? I mean, we've seen that. I think I forget the name recently. There was a company that kind of drifted a little bit, had one hole, company making hole, and they just kind of quadrupled in size. And yeah, just one single discovery hole can make all the difference. And so we're eagerly anticipating for the next 4 holes at Birch and the holes from Star.
Again, I appreciate you investing your time in me here, Rory, and I'm looking forward to our next conversation. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks, Antonio. Bye-bye.
And as always, thanks to everyone for watching Resource Talks. I have a couple of more things to say, though. The fact that this company was interviewed here today does not mean that they're necessarily a good or a bad company. I'm not here to endorse nor attack anyone. I am simply here to ask some questions. If you find that I have failed in asking a question that you would have liked to hear an answer to, which will happen as I'm not an experienced interviewer, please let me know, and I will try to correct that mistake in a future interview. As mentioned at the beginning, please understand that mineral exploration and development is an extremely risky business. Losing money is the norm and should be the expectation. This is a very complex sector, and the performance of individual companies typically depends on many different moving particles, including company-specific factors like geology, financing ability, and many others, really, as well as particles that are outside of the company's control, like geopolitics, macroeconomics, commodity prices, and many more, most of which are nearly impossible to fully understand. Moreover, these companies that typically get interviewed on Resource Talks are in the pre-revenue stage, which means they rely on the public markets for the financing of their operations, which could result in shareholder dilution. Furthermore, as a general rule of thumb, you'll be better off understanding that all company communications online, albeit this interview or their website and their presentation and their social media accounts, or even the social media accounts which you thought were your friends and then told you about a stock, everything really that these companies do is intended as marketing. And although I do not make buy or sell recommendations because there is a clear conflict of interest given the nature of my business, many out there do. And you should be aware of that inherent bias, and you should be careful out there. That bias is not always going to be clearly disclosed with everyone out there. So it is safer for you anytime you're watching any type of company specific content to approach it with a dose of skepticism and assume that the party telling you about it is biased in at least some shape or form, because there will always be a bias. Again, albeit clear or not. So always ask yourself what the incentive of your counterparty is and never rely on them regardless of their incentives, but instead double check if what they're saying is true, again, by using setterplus.ca. The fact that I have no idea what I'm doing should already be clear to you at this point. I am not saying this to make jokes or laugh with myself. I just simply do not have a long enough track record of consistent investment profits. So I should under no circumstances be considered an authority on anything. Again, although this may sound amusing to you, believe me, it is not amusing and it is not intended as a joke. I'm simply pointing out a fact and warning you not to rely on anything I do or say. Unfortunately, at least to my understanding, nobody out there has any special abilities. The CEOs do not possess any superior knowledge, and they cannot know about what will go up, what will go down, or what will go in circles. Some people even believe that to be rule number one on Wall Street. Nobody really knows. None of us know whether any of the company's activities will result in a success, again, given that we're talking about high-risk activities where most of the times it ends in failure. So unfortunately, try as I may, I won't always catch all red flags or all challenges with the companies. So even if I did ask a few tough questions in here, don't rely on this being all of the tough questions. Again, these are complicated startups with many moving parts, and I am conflicted given the nature of this business. Therefore, I cannot guarantee the quality of anything presented in this video, and you cannot hold me responsible for any losses or damages stemming from the way you decide to use this interview. Viewers, listeners, and readers acknowledge and agree that the information presented herein did not constitute a solicitation or an offer to buy or sell any security or investment or to participate in any trading strategy. Resource Talks and all parties involved in the management of the business strictly disclaim any and all liability for losses and or damages, whether direct, indirect, special, or consequential, or other consequences, however so caused, arising out of any use or reproduction of the content published by Resource Talks or any decision made or action taken in reliance upon it. By consuming this content, all consumers vow to release Resource Talks and all parties involved in the management of the business from all claims, proceedings, or consequences. This is all to say, I know it's a lot of lawyer talk, but this is all to say that you shouldn't blindly trust me or anybody on the internet, and you should do your own research. Once again, social media is meant for entertainment. It is setterplus.ca where you do your research. That's where you'll find the company's official filings, and I encourage you to read and analyze the Management Information Circular, the financial statements, the Management Discussion and Analysis, and whenever available, the NI 43-101 technical documents. If you don't understand everything in those documents, the chances of you losing money are even higher than they normally are in this space. And as mentioned earlier, the chances of even the best analysts in this sector losing money are extremely high, since this is venture capital and it is not for everybody. I'll leave you with one of Charlie Munger's quotes, which I wish I had listened to more often earlier on, which says, quote, "If you don't understand it, don't do it."